Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxer on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. We'll start off with what I think most fans consider to be the disappointing news, that Terence Crawford will be fighting David Avanesyan on December the 10th in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, it's not that this fight is a bad fight, not at all. Avanesyan is a very exciting, come-forward fighter. He's knocked out 6 of his last opponents in a row. Since that Mean Machine defeat, basically, he's stopped everyone. And he's had some notable wins in that time too. He stopped Josh Kelly, he stopped Kerman Leharaga on 2 occasions. So there's no reason that he shouldn't be working his way towards a title shot. But because we've all been waiting for and expecting the fight against ERROL SPENCE Jr., this is a bitter blow. Now, ERROL SPENCE had been tweeting over the last couple of days, so there were some warning signs there, because he initially said, Crawford has been stalling for months. I could have fought in November. I've been fighting at this weight for over a decade. This stuff isn't easy or fun. So he's clearly putting it at the doorstep of Terence Crawford. Bud, though, is taking a very different approach. He's saying, I'm excited about this opportunity to fight Avanesyan. I was really looking forward to the ERROL Spence fight. I started communicating with Al Heyman and the PBC back in June. And unfortunately, they represent a fighter in ERROL Spence who didn't want the fight as bad as I did. I agreed to all their BS, and they've been dragging their ass for months. Spence was nowhere to be found while I was trying to make the deal. I explained to Al and Errol that I was going to fight before the end of the year. Avanesyan is a very tough task. He's knocked out his last 6 opponents, and the guy is dangerous. Once I'm successful against Avanesyan, my plan is still the same, to whoop ERROL Spence. So that's a good sign, that last little line, that there is still, it seems, the willingness and the desire and the intent to make the fight from the perspective of Bud Crawford. But who is to blame for this? To be honest with you, this viewpoint on Twitter where he said, she said, all we can really look at is the evidence portrayed, in my opinion, by Mike Coppinger, who explained that this would be happening, that this would fall through behind the scenes. Steve Kim as well, before it was announced, he said that there would be very disappointing news coming up over the next couple of days. And then Mike Coppinger came up and explained how it had broken down behind the scenes. So people behind the scenes were hearing things. Let me give you a little analogy. I want you to imagine that you are deciding that you're going to engage in a new business venture after somebody else has approached you and said to you, I want you to invest and we're going to make a lot of money together. Agree and sign the dotted line. You ask them, okay, what is it we're agreeing to? We're starting a business together. We're both going to invest 50-50 split, right? He then turns to you and says, actually, no. I believe that I've generated more revenue in the past, so I don't believe you're going to get 50-50. I don't think that would be realistic or fair. So you're going to have to take a lot less money. In the meantime as well, when you turn up with your lawyer to sign this contract and he turns up with his lawyer, he demands that you leave your lawyer and you go to work with his legal representation. Now, with regards to this analogy, obviously the business deal is the fight. The 2 businessmen are Bud and Spence, and the lawyers are the promotional teams that were representing them. Now, Bud may very well have been unhappy with Bob Arum. We know that, right? Because of the accusations he made after he left. Nonetheless, there was a demand for years of, you must cross the street. In other words, give up your lawyer and come and work with our lawyer to make the fight. So what do you do as a businessman? You say, okay, fine, I'll do that. I'll change my lawyer. I'll also accept the fact that I'm not going to get 50-50, even though that's what I deserve. But if you want me to have 35%, I need a guarantee. So the other businessman turns to you and says, no, there's no guarantee here. What we'll do though, of all the profits we make, we will give you 35%. So I'm not guaranteeing a return on your investment, but you will get 35% of all the profits. The only logical response, if you're going to go ahead with that, is to say, fine, I want to be able to see all the costs and I want to be able to see the profits. I need to know what it is that we're making as a business venture in order to know how much I'm entitled to. Where is our expenditure? Where are our profits? Now, according to Mike Coppinger, Al Heyman of the PBC, that side of things, Team Spence, were not willing to give up transparency. They were not allowing Bud Crawford to be able to see the books. In what world does this work from a business perspective? So it's easy for Errol to be sitting there and saying he's been stalling for months. Well, of course he's been stalling for months. What kind of a business deal offer is this? Now listen, this isn't some biased channel. I'm not one of those that's sitting there thinking, yeah, Errol Spence knows he's going to lose and he doesn't want any part of Bud. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case. It could be a case of greed. There could be a variety of reasons, which we're going to now consider after this. But one thing is for sure, it seems like the willingness to make the fight certainly came from Bud. And I'm not a believer either that Spence is looking at this thinking, I'm going to lose this fight. Bud Crawford is an incredible fighter. He's got the X factor. He's got the most incredible adaptability and adjustability in a fight. We've seen this time and time again. A fight might not be going his way, and then he will turn it on its head with an unbelievable adjustment. He's one of, if not the best in the entire sport at doing something like that. He switches up his style instantly when he notices that things might not be going his way. It's incredible. But if you're talking about boxing fundamentals and the technical elements of the sport, it's very, very plausible that Errol Spence is better than Bud from the technical fundamentals perspective. His jab, his defense, he's brilliant. There is a reason he's called the Truth. So make no mistake, this is a pick-em fight. And when there is a pick-em fight and you've had the career that Errol Spence has had, and he's the naturally bigger man, I've got no reason to believe that he's afraid of Bud Crawford. But from a sheer business perspective, it doesn't make sense what they've been demanding if what Coppinger has reported is accurate. Now let's consider some of the other elements. We know that Steve Kim, fantastic at what he does, boxing insider, boxing journalist, he put out a few tweets and he was saying, my view is that Crawford is taking this fight versus Avanesiyan as a tune-up, believing that the Spence bout will take place in the spring. He doesn't want to go into the fight with a 12-month plus layoff. That's fantastic. If that's true, that's what we're all hoping for, then who can hold it against him? And besides, from a boxing perspective, you want that to happen because you certainly want when two fighters to both be sharp if they're getting in the ring together. Steve Kim also, however, put out other tweets and he said, I asked after the Crawford-Brook fight if a Spence-Crawford fight would break 500k buys. Most of you said no, and that's the problem. The financial projections for this fight can't cover their expectations for this matchup. Now bear in mind, according to the reports, again from Coppinger, Bud Crawford's making 8 figures, $10 million to fight Avanesiyan. If he's going to be getting less money, for instance, to fight Errol Spence, potentially, he would be mad not to take this fight. They're still prize fighters. It's still a risk versus reward. So from the perspective of him getting a bigger guarantee, say here, he's due to make more money, theoretically speaking, and he's seeing transparency and things like that. Why would he not take the fight? So whichever way you look at this, from a sporting perspective, from a business perspective, you start to see, in my opinion, that Bud's hands are tied. He almost has to move away and take this fight. Number one, to remain sharp, so from a sporting perspective, and number two, from a sheer business perspective. Steve Kim also explained, so you're surprised that a system that routinely overpays its participants wasn't going to run into a problem in terms of making certain fights. And then you add in a depleted pay-per-view market. But hey, let's list those UFC purses. And he makes another great point here, which is a contentious point because you don't ever want to begrudge what fighters earn. So I guess he's raising a topic here and he's asking, essentially, are fighters making so much money that they're comfortable not to take risks? In the past, when they're not making that sort of money, they have to take massive risks to be in big fights in order to become multimillionaires. Now, if it's not necessary, why would they risk it all? So are we seeing this sort of issue as well now? Let me know what you think about all that. So where does Errol Spence himself go from here? Well, the majority of the news outlets are reporting that Stanionis will be the guy to step in the ring with Errol Spence. He was willing to take step-aside money to allow the unification fight to go ahead if he was then entitled to a mandatory shot. So he was willing to accept that. But now if the fight's not going to go ahead, he's not going to accept step-aside money to allow a Keith Thurman fight, for instance, which would theoretically be a bigger money spinning fight. Boots Ennis, of course, would also love to step to the fore, but I can't really envisage that happening, and I don't think they feel as though it will happen either. So it looks like it will be a Stanionis fight, and listen, that's a good fight as a standalone fight. It's just disappointing when they dangle the carrot of Spence versus Bud in front of you, and then you end up with Spence Stanionis and potentially Crawford Avanesiyan. Now, standalone fights, like I said, very exciting, but it feels like a downgrade. It's kind of like when we were expecting or hoping for Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua. Whoever Fury then goes on to fight, you're going to end up being disappointed. And it's not that whoever he potentially fights would have been a poor fight. It's just that when you're promised the world and then you receive less, well, those high expectations are going to lead to disappointment. And talking of Tyson Fury, they have announced that he will be fighting Derek Chisora. Now, long-time subscribers will know I was not a supporter of this fight, not because I've got an issue with Derek, right? I think Derek is fantastic. What a warrior. I did that George Kambosos video recently describing exactly what a warrior spirit that man has, willing to take all the risks, wanting all that smoke. Well, Derek Chisora has done it for a lot longer than Kambosos, and he's been in with some of the best fighters of this era and of the last era. The man is an absolute warrior, and who can begrudge him a big payday? And you know he's gonna come out swinging. But from the perspective of a neutral fan, you look at it and you say, well, Tyson Fury has already beaten him twice. The first fight when Fury was still an up-and-coming novice, and even Chisora had yet to reach his peak. They were both up-and-coming guys. That was a really good, entertaining, competitive fight. But by the time they both reached their peaks, Tyson Fury put on a masterclass. Possibly the best version of Tyson Fury there's ever been in the rematch against Derek Chisora. Now, you could, I guess, if you're looking for reasons to say, this could be a little bit different, it could be more exciting. Tyson Fury's style has changed. He's not as elusive as he once was. His feet aren't as fast as they used to be. Derek War Chisora is always going to bring war. And if Tyson Fury, who's a lot more destructive now and more planted as a fighter, maybe Chisora can get a bit closer. Maybe Chisora can have some success and it will be a barn burner of a fight. Who knows? But the truth is, the majority of us aren't expecting that. The majority of us are expecting a very one-sided fight. And there were other options that a lot of people would have preferred to have seen. There was a fantastic interview that I really advise you guys to check out from Boxing King Media. He interviews Frank Warren and he suggests that Tyson Fury could have fought a whole bunch of other guys. Arslanbek Makhmudov. He suggests that basically there were better fights for him out there against undefeated guys, and there may have been the problem of selling these fights as they're not well known or as well known as Dell, but they would have been better fights. And Frank gets rattled. Frank gets very, very angry. He tries to go down the route of Derek Chisora essentially being the highest ranked fighter and things like that. He's basically upset at being challenged. That's the reality here. I would advise you guys to check out that interview. And listen, I don't necessarily have expected him to step in with an undefeated guy like Arslanbek ahead of a undisputed title fight against Usyk. And I do think a lot of the backlash is down to the fact that we did have that carrot dangled in front of us, just like we did with Spence and Crawford. Nonetheless, I still feel as though even if you're looking for easier fights against guys who have a respectable name, but you know that you're going to be the hot favourite against, I still felt personally that I would have liked to have seen a guy he's not yet been in the ring with, whether it was even somebody like Ajit Caballero. It doesn't have to be a world beater, but somebody where there's a bit of intrigue. We've seen these two already, and I just can't see what Derek Chisora is going to bring. And this is a stadium fight in December, outdoors. Is it going to sell? How are people going to want to turn up in the freezing cold? I know they do for football matches, so people might be willing to do it, but it's still a stadium fight in the winter, and they're going to be looking to sell it on pay-per-view as well. How well do you think this fight will do? Are you excited? Will you be watching? Make no mistake, I will be watching. There's no doubt. But remember, pay-per-views are more about the casual market than the hardcores. Finally, a last couple of comments. Happy birthday to the Hitman. Look how slick he looks there. Thomas Hearns, one-of-a-kind fighter. His birthday today, and he was very active on social media. You gotta love the Hitman. And finally, I'm going to leave you with a little story. Base the Kid, the hardcore casual. If you've not checked out his channel, do check it out. Really sad little story. So I had to leave a little video out for him just to say, send the guy your best. Go give him a follow. You know, improve his day, cheer him up. Because, wait till you hear this. He had an accumulator, a 20 selection accumulator. The only selection that let him down was Atletico Madrid, who were winning until late in the game, and then there was an equalizer. Had Atletico Madrid held on, he would have won £35,000. Send this dude some love over there, man. You got to feel sorry for him. You know, I had a bet a number of years ago whereby the only selection that I was waiting on was Korobov to beat Charlo, and he blatantly won that fight. I'm still fuming about it. That was only, I can't remember exactly how much, but it was a few grand, £2,000-3,000, something like that. Imagine 35, my word, I would have entered full-on depression. So send Base the Kid some love, people. Go check out his videos, comment on his videos. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Take care. God bless.